Does your refrigerator look like this? Well, mine does, and so I decided to do a show on how to organize it a little bit better and save some money and get all this mess cleaned up. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Nino Gonzalez and welcome to another episode of Making Sense. Well, as I was trying to cook a meal at home and I opened up the fridge and I really couldn't find anything without having to take some stuff out, and it was stored in the back, and I finally found it and then having it to put back, it sort of got frustrating. So I said, how come I don't do a show on how to organize your refrigerator and also try and save some money? Because I read up on this and did a little bit of research, and it's amazing to hear the stats. So let me read to you some of these stats on what happens when your refrigerator is a jungle. 31 to 40% of the American food supply is wasted, mostly by homes, restaurants, and stores. That means that the energy and fertilizer that went into producing and transporting those foods were also wasted. And the most wasted foods that happen by weight are going to be fruits and vegetables. And we as Americans, we spend about 161.6 billion a year on food that goes to waste. So how can we minimize some of the waste that happens in our refrigerators and try and keep that refrigerator in a nicely orderly manner where we can find things and not have to struggle in pulling things out and then putting them back again and make that refrigerator work more efficiently? Well, the first thing I would suggest is take everything out. Let's go ahead and take everything out and make sure that you take a look at the expiration dates of everything that's in the refrigerator, and if it's past the expiration date, then it's time to toss it. Sometimes we might buy sauces or some sort of syrups or whatever for a special recipe, and we think we're going to use it again, and it gets stuck in the fridge and we never use it again. So it's important that we always check those expiration dates, and if they're past the expiration date by, I would say, more than a month, then it's probably time to toss it out, because if you haven't used it, you will probably not use it at all. So that's the very first suggestion into getting it organized is let's take everything out and let's empty it out and let's clean it and let's start from scratch and see what is it that we want to keep and what is it that we don't want to keep, because we don't do this as often as we should. And once we get it in order, then it's just a method of maintaining it, and it won't get to those pictures that I showed you. So as we're trying to organize the refrigerator, I would suggest you install baskets or bins and group like items. So maybe you might put in a basket or a bin all the cheeses, and another one maybe lunch meat, and another one maybe buns or things like that, and we can organize it. And you can get several plastic bins at the dollar store, and that won't cost you very much, and you're probably not going to need probably more than 4 or 5 bins to do this. So that's one way to organize it, and as you need something, then you can just pull that bin out and then get what you want. And if you need some sort of cheese, well, you know you got the cheeses in all stored in one bin. Another one is real important as you're cleaning the refrigerator out, and especially as you're going to put stuff back in, is make sure you set the temperature and humidity correctly. So a safe refrigerator should be no warmer than 40 degrees. And we need to set the humidity and temperature separately if that's allowable, especially for the crisper drawers, for your fruits and vegetables. So if you use a high humidity for vegetables and low humidity for fruit, that's what we want. Leafy greens and green onions like it cool and humid. Keep apples, pears, plums, cantaloupes, peaches separate from other fruits and vegetables because they release gas that prevents ripening. Keep tomatoes, cucumbers, and bananas outside of the refrigerator. Store potatoes, sweet potatoes, onions, and dry garlic out of the crisper to reduce the humidity, or store them outside of the refrigerator. And remember, as we're buying these items, make sure we can buy, not if we're buying in bulk to save money but we're not using it, then that's not a good idea. Only buy what you need, even if it means maybe making a few more extra trips to the store to replenish those items. And that's what I would suggest, because sometimes we see a good deal on a big bag of potatoes, but we might not use them all. So maybe it might not be that good of a deal if you're not going to use them. Cauliflower, wrap it in damp paper towels in a container or plastic bag. That helps maintain the humidity it needs. So those are some suggestions, and what we do have in our refrigerator is a little thermometer, a fridge thermometer, and it's important to put that and always check it to make sure that it is at 40 degrees or a little bit below. We don't want to get it too much under 40, because then things might start freezing in your refrigerator. Now let's take a look at the door, and I showed you a picture of what our refrigerator door looks like. But sometimes you have containers there for eggs and dairy, and we don't want to store those there, because as you open up the door, then the temperature of those items are going to fluctuate. So that's not a good place, even though there's storage there for those items, to put those there. So use the door for sauces, dressings, jams, pickles, soda, wine and beer, other less fragile foods. So if the door area isn't all warm though, then the bottom shelf of the door is the coldest spot. So if you want to store something that needs a little bit more refrigeration and needs to be colder, then make sure you put it at the bottom shelf. Other cold spots in your fridge are going to be the top shelf and the back of the middle shelf. So depending what items need a little bit more coldness, those are the spots where you want to put them. Now, if you took a look at that first picture, you know, I've seen some refrigerators where you can't even see the light, because it's stacked all the way to the top. As a matter of fact, one of my crew members was talking that her mom's refrigerator looks like that, and so not trying to put her on the spot, but you know, ours looks like that as well. So what happens when you're stacking it like that is that you're preventing circulation. Refrigerators, appliances need to breathe. And that's also going to raise the temperature in the refrigerator, which is going to encourage spoiling. So we also don't want to have it too bare, because then that's going to be a waste of the appliance. So make sure you buy a refrigerator, or if you already have one, make sure not to overfill it. Make sure also not to have it too bare. You just want to have the right amount in there that is going to be for your use. And sometimes when we go out and shop for appliances, we think that bigger is better, and sometimes we might not need that big size refrigerator because we might not use it. So consider what is it that you need, your family size, and how often also you're going to be cooking at home, because that's also a big difference. If you don't cook that much at home and you eat out, then your fridge is probably going to be used less, and you might not need all those items in there. So it all take that into consideration. Another thing that I would suggest is there's Lazy Susans, and the Lazy Susans are basically little round devices that spin, and you can put that somewhere in your fridge, and you can put jams, jars, and bottles, so that way as you need them, you can just rotate it around and you can access those. And those can be found at different prices at different department stores. So if you think you might need that, for sure go ahead and use that instead of keeping those items on the door, especially if you use them a lot. One of the things that I suggest is use labels, and also be wary of the containers that you're putting stuff in. So for example, on the weekends, usually what we do is we do meal prep for the week. So I might cook several big items on Saturday and Sunday, so that way we can have whatever I made available during the week, and that maybe might cut 2 or 3 days worth of cooking, where we can use whatever I made in a variety of different dishes. So one of the things that I would suggest is we always want to store our things in glass containers. So here I brought some example of glass containers, and here also is an example of a plastic container, but this one does have the marking that it says it's BPA free and it's microwave safe. And another thing is, as you can see, they're clear. And that's something that we want. We want clear containers, so that way we can see what's in there. And because if you're going to select a colored container, you're not going to know what's in there unless you open it. So it's real important that we have all our containers as clear as possible. And what I would suggest is, again, using a good plastic. This is a really thick plastic, or if not, let's go the glass route. And there's many sizes of these containers. Now, label them. Usually what we do is we use a wet erase marker, not a permanent marker, a wet erase marker, and you can write directly on the glass or on the plastic and make sure what it is and the date. That's real important. The date is important because if you're seeing that these dates are getting too old, then it's probably time to dump it out. You don't want to keep stuff in the fridge too long without freezing if you're not going to use it. So it is important that we put the dates. And that's another thing that we do with our freezer. And especially when you're storing meats or anything that you're going to freeze, or chicken, poultry items, or fish, it's important to put them in good quality freezer bags. And as you're putting them in and you're organizing it in, make sure you take as much of the air out as possible. So that way to prevent less spoilage of that item. And once you seal it up, then again on the plastic bag, make sure you write. You can even write where you purchased it from, write what it is and the date. So that way those freezer items will not stay in your freezer for a long time, because usually those type of items you probably should use them within 6 to 8 months and not let them stay there any longer. I've gone to my mom's and my mother-in-law's house, and I see stuff there that has been there for decades. and I'm sure you have family members like that as well. So we'll continue on the second half of Making Sense and go over more tips on how to organize that fridge. Stay tuned. Welcome to the second half of Making Sense, and I've been discussing basically a project that we are undertaking at home and trying to keep that fridge organized. And as I did some research, it's just amazing how much money goes to waste on stuff that we don't use. So if you took a look at one of those pictures at the beginning, we had the butter container in its shelf. But then there was some sauces there, like from Taco Bell or Jack in the Box or ketchup packets, whatever. I don't know why we save them, because are we ever going to use them? Probably not. So maybe it's just best to throw them away. And next time we go to that restaurant, make sure we don't get too much of the sauces, because you're probably not going to wind up using them, and they just stay there. So it's always funny. And then that those sauces have been there for quite a while, and we just need to get rid of them and make sure next time we don't get too many of those. Now, as you get your refrigerator organized, one of the things that I read, and I really didn't think about it, is to take a photo of it, and especially as you go shopping. So when you go shopping, make sure you take a photo of the inside and the door, And if you're also going to buy frozen items, maybe take a picture of the items in your freezer. Why? Because sometimes we miss items in our shopping list, and therefore you're saying, well, do I have that bottle of ketchup? Do we need more ketchup, or do we need more mustard? Well, you already have a picture in your phone, and you can just look it up, and maybe you can zoom in and you can see if there is a bottle of ketchup or a bottle of mustard. And sometimes with a bottle of ketchup, you can always see how full it is. And so that's maybe something that you might try doing, especially we're always missing something on that shopping list. And then when you get home or you want to make something and you go, oops, I forgot to buy that. So I found that tip pretty interesting, and I'm going to try that. Now, one of the things that is always usually a headache is to clean that refrigerator, especially when there's spills or anything like that. So one suggestion that I read is to line your shelves with plastic wrap that peels off, that will sort of stick a little bit on there. And then if there's any spills, you can just pull it off and then replace it with new one. And that way it could lessen the time that you spend on cleaning. Now, as you empty that refrigerator out, it's a good time to give every nook and cranny of that refrigerator a good clean. And this is where that water and vinegar solution that I've talked about in other shows, that I have in a spray bottle, just spray the whole refrigerator with that water and vinegar solution, let it sit for a little bit, and then come down and wipe it. And in some areas it might require a little bit more elbow grease or something like that. If you need an abrasive, you can put a little bit of baking soda on it to help take whatever is stuck on any of the shelves. But it's real important to give it a good thorough cleaning. And then let's try maybe in the crispers, what we do is we put paper towels there at the bottom, so therefore it makes it a little bit easier to clean if something rots and then spills out, especially with fruits and vegetables. And then also you can line your shelves with plastic liners, so it makes it a little bit easier. And as you're cleaning that fridge, please do not forget to also clean the seal around the door. That's real important, and make sure that seal is still good, and it's when you close it that it makes a good seal, so that therefore none of the cold air is escaping and we don't have any potential humidity in there. So it's important to get that seal clean, because sometimes, depending on the weather, your refrigerator does breathe, and that's a good collection of bacteria and mold. Again, you can spray it with that water vinegar solution, and maybe take a toothbrush and go in through the ridges and clean that up. So another thing to help minimize maybe the spills in your fridge is store the messy stuff down low. So it is a lot easier to clean up a mess on one shelf than all over. And so potential messes on the bottom shelves, that includes meat and seafood, in case anything spills, and especially if it spills and it won't trickle down to other shelves and possibly contaminate other items that are in your refrigerator. And talking about meats and seafood and poultry, we need to isolate those. Treat raw meat, poultry and eggs, seafood, and juices like they're dangerous. So bacteria can spread inside the fridge really easily. So what I would suggest is sometimes we bring meat from the supermarket and we leave it in the packaging it's in. They don't really recommend that, because as you've noticed, sometimes when you go to the supermarket, they're already bleeding through the plastic wrap. So a suggestion that I've read and also that we do is you wrap that meat in freezer paper. You wrap it in freezer paper and you tape it, and again, make sure you label that freezer paper, what it is, the date you bought it, and if you're going to use it, then leave it in the fridge. If you're not, then that's a good time also to transfer it to the freezer. But it's real important that we take them out of those packages. because those foam trays where usually meat and chicken come in. So as we were talking about juices and teas and milk, especially milk and juices, sometimes we buy them in bigger containers. And if that container is too big, then you might want to transfer some of that to a smaller container, maybe a pitcher, maybe a wine carafe where you can pour that liquid in there and then store the rest. If you do have another refrigerator, a lot of households have other fridges where they store some of the extra stuff to eliminate the overcrowding in the main refrigerator. One of the things that I like to use, and I like to collect, first of all, beer memorabilia, but this is a really nice beer pitcher that can be used to, you can store milk in there, you can store juice, iced tea or whatever, and you're not using plastic. And one of the things, if you're thinking something might get in there while it's in the fridge, just put a small plastic wrap on the top, and therefore you can prevent that from happening. So that takes care of that problem. So let's talk about for example, basil, parsley, and cilantro. They last longer outside the fridge. And one suggestion that I read is trim the stem ends and keep them on the counter in the glass of water, like a bouquet of flowers. And as you need them, then you can just snip them, snip what you need in order for your dishes or for your cooking. Thyme, rosemary, and chives do best when refrigerated. So don't rinse the herbs until just before using. Wrap them loosely in plastic wrap and keep them in a warmer area of the refrigerator. A compartment in the door is a good area. Wrapping them, don't wrap them too tightly because it's going to trap moisture, which is going to lead to wilting and mold. So make sure we take into consideration what we're buying and what is it that we're using, and know how to store it correctly. And nowadays, with so many websites out there and with information, you can find out how to properly store vegetables, fruits, herbs, and all of those items. Once again, the thing that you want to do is choosing good quality storage containers, and try and stay away from the cheaper thin plastic. Make sure that it's labeled BPA free. Although there's been some issues that says that that we shouldn't even use any plastic, and what will happen, especially if you're storing, sometimes we might cook something and that food, we might not let it cool down to room temperature, and we store it in a plastic container. Well, that's hot food, and if it's not a good quality plastic, what's going to happen is that some of those ingredients or those chemicals in that plastic could leach on into the food due to the temperature that it's being stored at. So real important, let's stick to glass, or let's stick to the good quality plastic, and make sure you read that it's BPA free, and so the chemicals will not leach into your food. And never microwave anything in plastic. I know I had a guest before and we talked about that. Sometimes, we're in a rush and something might be in a plastic bag, and we stick it in the microwave and warm it up, even if it's a little like sandwich baggie and it's something that needs to be warmed. I've done that, and I know I shouldn't. Try, always do it on ceramic dishes, glass, or plastic that says microwavable safe. For example, these have a label at the bottom that says microwavable safe. So, and don't reuse. A lot of times, especially in our Hispanic culture, we reuse containers from other foods, okay? So I've seen a lot of Tupperware containers that aren't Tupperware, but they're old butter containers or margarine containers. That's very common. That's what we call the Hispanic Tupperware, and we reuse those. And those are not meant to be reused and to store food over and over again, because that is not a good quality plastic. Or sometimes we go to a restaurant or we go to a store and we buy some hot food and they package it in a nice plastic container and we say, oh, we're going to keep that because we're going to reuse it. Those are meant for single use and not to be used. But I know that in a lot of households, those get reused over and over again, and with those temperature fluctuations that you're storing in there, that's not a good quality plastic, and chemicals could possibly leach into your food. Now, how about the bottles and the cans? Well, there's different containers that are used to keep those in order. Some fridges have specific already built-in containers where you can put cans and bottles. Usually what we do is we maintain a separate fridge for the cans and the bottles so they don't clutter the main fridge. And I've seen that, so that's where we keep the soft drinks and of course any chilled wine and of course beer. We got to keep that cold as well, so but it won't clog up your main fridge. So I hope these tips really help you in organizing your refrigerator. Now, we went through this project. Now let me show you a picture of how it looked like, and we still need some work on it after we did the cleaning. And I think it looks a lot better. Things are a little bit more organized, and I won't get frustrated when I need to cook and I can't find an item. And that avoids a lot of little fights in the household. So we'll see you next time on another episode of Making Sense. Goodbye.